Have you ever heard of AI cold cases?
No.
Like, what if artificial intelligence can solve crimes before they even happen?
Oh, wow.
That's what we're diving into today. The story of Operation Mindfold, an alleged AI program called Sentinel that some say maybe could have predicted the 9/11 attacks. So picture this. Late 90s, the NSA is developing this super advanced AI goal is to analyze global data like travel records, communications, financial transactions
Right.
to identify potential terrorist threats.
Pretty ambitious.
Very ambitious.
Right. And some sources say it had an accuracy rate of 88%.
Wow, 88%.
I know, that's huge. It makes you wonder, though, like, what does 88% accuracy even mean when you're talking about predicting something as complex as a terrorist attack?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, so let's talk about what Sentinel supposedly uncovered.
Okay.
July 2001, just 2 months before 9/11, and Sentinel flags Khalid al-Mihdhar as a critical threat, someone who will enter the U.S. and commit mass murder. But the report is buried, ignored.
Wow.
2 months later, al-Mihdhar pilots Flight 77 into the Pentagon.
So could 9/11 have been prevented? That's what we're going to try to figure out. We're going deep into the story of Operation Mindfold and explore the events that followed.
Okay.
Our primary source for this deep dive comes from someone claiming to be a former NSA analyst, going by the pseudonym Maria G.
Right.
She says that she tried to raise the alarm about Sentinel's warning regarding al-Mihdhar and another individual, Nawaf al-Hazmi.
Okay.
We got to remember, though, right, we're dealing with anonymous sources here.
Right.
So taking everything at face value wouldn't be the best idea.
Right.
But what if we entertain the possibility for a second? Could a system like this even have existed back in the early 2000s?
Yeah, it's interesting because even back then, the NSA had huge data collection capabilities.
Right.
I mean, it's not out of the realm of possibility that they were monitoring these guys already, al-Mihdhar and al-Hazmi.
Right. And what's really striking is what Maria claims happened when she tried to resort what she found.
Okay.
According to her account, her supervisor dismissed her concerns and said, "The machine is paranoid. We're not chasing ghosts." Chilling statement in retrospect.
Yeah, very much so.
That makes you think about, human judgment versus machine, right?
Yeah.
Back then, AI was still in its infancy. Could it be that human analysts just weren't ready to trust a machine with something like national security?
Yeah, it's possible.
Then we have this. September 10th, 2001, Operation Mindfold is suddenly shut down. Next day, 9/11 happens.
Wow.
Coincidence? Maybe, but it definitely raises questions.
For sure.
This is where things get even more complicated. The 9/11 Commission report, the official investigation, stated that there was no specific warning before 9/11.
Right.
Now, the commission had a massive task. They had to sift through tons of data, witness testimony, intelligence reports.
Mountains of it.
Yeah. Is it possible they missed something?
Yeah.
Or are they pressured to avoid certain findings? It's been a source of debate ever since.
Yeah, definitely.
So let's fast forward to 2016. Freedom of Information Act request, or FOIA request, reveals some interesting info. FOIA requests are really important for government transparency. It's how we can access government documents, hold those in power accountable.
Right.
These documents show that Sentinel had actually flagged Saudi-funded wire transfers. Basically, electronic money transfers going directly to al-Mihdhar.
Okay.
Mark Reynolds, a former CIA tech director, has publicly said that he believes Operation Mindfold was shut down to protect U.S.-Saudi relations.
Interesting.
And the declassified documents seem to support that theory. Here's another twist. 28 pages of the 9/11 Commission report are still classified.
Really?
What's in those pages? Why this secrecy? I mean, governments have to balance national security and transparency, but when is secrecy too much? It definitely fuels suspicion and mistrust.
Yeah, it does.
This whole situation is just full of unanswered questions.
Yeah.
Like, why would the government prioritize foreign relations over potentially saving lives? What does that say about how national security decisions are made?
Big questions.
But wait, there's more. In 2017, a hacker group called Phantom Core Leaks Info, suggesting the same AI, the same mindfold tech that maybe predicted 9/11, was later used to justify the Iraq War.
Hold on, are you saying the AI was manipulated?
That's what some cybersecurity experts believe. Dr. Patel, who spoke on condition of anonymity, argues that Mindfold's true predictions, the ones that might have prevented 9/11, were suppressed.
Wow.
And instead, they used other data to support the Bush administration's pre-existing agenda, building a case for war in Iraq.
It's a chilling thought.
It is right. That a tool designed to protect us could be twisted and used to manipulate us into conflict. This really raises questions about how much we can trust information in the digital age. especially when AI is involved.
Huge questions.
We're not done yet.
Oh,
In 2021, a Reddit user, Mindfold Leaks, starts posting cryptic messages.
okay.
The internet can be a wild west when it comes to information games. Platforms like Reddit, where anyone can post anonymously, can be a haven for whistleblowers and leaks. But how do you know what's real and what's not? And just when you think things can't get any weirder, we here at the studio get a letter in 2022 from Maria G. herself.
What?
We tracked the letter to a retired colonel in Texas who agreed to talk, but only if we kept him anonymous.
Wow.
And he issued a warning. A really unsettling warning.
Okay.
He claims that the code from Operation Mindfold, the same code that might have predicted 9/11, could still be out there embedded in the surveillance systems we use today.
Wait, are you saying this code is not just predicting events, but shaping them?
That's what he believes. And he says anyone who gets too close to the truth like Maria tried to do is silenced.
That's scary.
It's a chilling thought, right? It makes you think about the level of surveillance we live under and who controls that technology. If something like Mindfold does exist today, what is it predicting? And are we ready for the answer?
Good questions.
I don't know about you, but I feel like I've fallen down a rabbit hole.
Yeah, right. It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
And we're just getting started.
What I find fascinating is that we often think of AI as this, force for good. But what about the potential for harm? This story really highlights the dark side of powerful tech, especially when it's shrouded in secrecy. And it makes you wonder, if a system like this could predict terrorist attacks, what else could it predict and control? We'll be exploring those questions further in just a minute.
Okay.
We're back and ready to keep digging into this whole Mindfold situation. You know, it's easy to think about AI as this future tech that'll solve all our problems. But this story kind of makes you question that.
It does. It's really important to remember AI is just a tool. Like any tool it can be used for good or bad depends who's using it, right? What their intentions are.
Right. And the idea that this system that's supposed to predict events could actually be shaping those events is pretty crazy.
Yeah, it is. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Imagine a system that flags someone as a potential criminal.
Right.
Then law enforcement focuses more attention on that person.
Yeah.
Which maybe leads them to do things they might not have done otherwise.
That is a scary thought.
It is. It makes you think about free will. Are we actually in control of our own lives? Or are we being, manipulated by algorithms?
Yeah, those are some heavy questions.
They are, and I don't think they're easy answers, but I think that's exactly why we need to be talking about this. We need to be aware of the dangers so we can try to prevent them.
Absolutely.
So where do we even go from here? How do we figure out the truth about Operation Mindfold and what it all means?
Well, I think we have to keep digging. We've got these documents that have been declassified, the leaks, the stories from people like Maria. These are all pieces of the puzzle.
Right, and what about those 28 missing pages from the 9/11 Commission report? Do you think those pages are the key to figuring all of this out?
They could be. I mean, there's so much secrecy around those pages. It makes you wonder what's in them.
Yeah, maybe info about Saudi Arabia or specifics about how the AI was manipulated. Hopefully one day those pages will be released and we'll finally get some answers.
I hope so.
But this isn't just about the past. We have to think about how these technologies are being used right now and what that means for the future.
Oh, for sure. We need to be really careful about how AI is being used in our lives, like algorithms on social media that control what we see and believe, even surveillance systems that track us everywhere.
It's a lot to worry about.
Oh.
I know, but we can't just ignore it. We have to educate ourselves about AI and understand the risks and demand transparency from the people who are developing and using these technologies.
I agree completely. Knowledge is power. The more we know about AI, the better we'll be able to handle all of this.
So what can people do? What are some specific things our listeners can do to protect themselves and their privacy?
I think the first thing is just to be aware of it. Learn about how AI is being used and how it can be misused.
Right.
Understand the risks and protect your data. It's so easy to just accept these new technologies without really thinking about them.
It is.
Yeah.
Yeah, we need to be more critical and question things more.
Exactly. And we need to hold our leaders accountable. We need to demand regulations and oversight to make sure these technologies are being used the right way.
That's a good point. And there are organizations out there fighting for digital rights and privacy. Support them. Get involved. Make your voice heard.
For sure.
And you know what? I think we also need to remember that we're not powerless. We can choose to limit our online activity. Be more careful about what we share.
Right.
We can demand transparency. We can vote for people who care about our privacy.
Yeah, absolutely. We can support groups that are fighting for a better digital future.
Exactly. That's a really good point. Speaking of shaping the future, there's one more part of this story that we haven't really talked about yet. Maybe the most unsettling part.
You're talking about the Colonel's warning, right?
Yeah. His claim that the code from Operation Mindfold is not only still being used, but it's evolved. It's more powerful now, more widespread.
Right. And that it's not just predicting events anymore, it's shaping them, influencing what happens, maybe even controlling people's decisions.
Exactly. And that brings up some big questions about free will, about what it even means to be human.
I know. Think about it. What if our choices are being influenced by algorithms? What if they're already decided for us?
That's a terrifying thought, to think that we might just be pawns in some big game, our moves controlled by code, written by who knows who, for who knows what reason.
Yeah, it's pretty scary.
It is. It's something we can't just ignore. But we also can't forget that we still have power. We can think critically. We can question the information we're given. We can make our own choices, even when there's a lot of pressure to do something else.
I hope you're right. This whole thing is kind of unsettling.
I know. It's a lot to take in. But it's important to have these conversations. We need to be aware of the risks of AI so that we can make sure it's used to help people not hurt them.
That's the goal.
So where do we go from here? What's our next step in trying to figure out this whole Operation Mindfold thing?
I think we need to look into the Colonel's claims more carefully. See if there's any evidence to support what he's saying. And we need to find Maria G. She's the key to understanding what really happened back in 2001.
But if the Colonel's right, and there are people trying to hide this information, finding her won't be easy.
It won't be. It's going to be risky.
It is. But the truth is worth it. Don't you think?
I do. And I have a feeling this is just the tip of the iceberg.
You know, there's something that's been bugging me this whole time.
What's that?
This whole story depends on the idea that Sentinel was super accurate.
Yeah.
That it could predict 9/11 with 88% accuracy. But what does that even mean? How do you measure accuracy when you're talking about something as complicated as a terrorist attack?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Honestly, I don't know if there's a simple answer. Predicting what people are going to do is still a pretty new thing with AI. There's a lot we don't understand about how it works.
So even if Sentinel did exist, and it did flag al-Mihdhar, there's no way to know for sure if the attacks could have been stopped.
Right. And even if it was accurate, there's always the possibility of human error. Someone could have misunderstood the data or thought it was a false alarm.
Right. It's like AI isn't a perfect solution. It's a tool, and it has to be used carefully.
Yeah.
And it definitely can't replace human judgment and thinking.
I think you're exactly right.
Well, after hearing all of this, I'm even more determined to get to the bottom of it.
Me too. The stakes are too high to ignore.
We have to find out the truth about Operation Mindfold, about whether AI can be used for good or for evil, about the future of our freedom and our privacy. We owe it to ourselves and to everyone who comes after us to make sure these technologies are used responsibly and ethically.
I completely agree.
This whole story just shows how blurry the lines are becoming between reality and science fiction.
It really does.
And it's up to all of us to make sure we're creating a future that we can all live in.
Well said.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Oh.
All this week, we've been talking about Operation Mindfold and the possibility that the NSA developed an AI that could predict terrorist attacks.
And maybe even shape events.
Exactly. And to help us unpack all of this, we have a special guest with us, Dr. David Anderson. He's an expert in AI ethics and surveillance tech. Dr. Anderson, welcome to the Deep Dive.
Thanks for having me.
So, Dr. Anderson, we've uncovered a lot of information about Operation Mindfold and the potential risks that come with using AI to predict things, especially when it comes to something like criminal activity.
Well, it's really important to keep in mind that predicting how humans are going to behave is extremely hard, especially something as complex as terrorism, even with the most advanced AI.
What about that 88% accuracy rate we keep hearing about? Does that even make sense in real life?
It's hard to know for sure without more details on how they calculated that number.
Okay.
But even if we assume this system exists and it's being used to watch people, it brings up some pretty serious ethical questions.
Like what?
Well, imagine a system that flags people as potential criminals just based on what they do online or who they're friends with.
So you're saying it could punish people for crimes they haven't even committed?
Exactly. It's a dangerous path to go down. And then there's the issue of bias. AI learns from data, right? And if that data is already biased, the AI will just continue those biases. It could lead to discrimination and unfair treatment.
It's like judging people based on a profile instead of what they actually do.
That's a real risk.
Yeah.
And there's also the problem of transparency. If these systems are working in secret with nobody watching or holding them accountable, How can we trust that they're being used ethically and responsibly?
So how can we hold the people in power accountable if we don't even know what they're doing?
That's the challenge. These are tough questions and there aren't any easy solutions.
So what can we do? What can our listeners do to protect themselves and their privacy in a world that's becoming more and more digital?
Well, the first step is awareness. We need to learn about how AI is being used and how it can be misused. We need to understand the risks and be smart about protecting our data.
So it's not enough to just accept new tech without thinking about the implications.
Exactly. We need to be more critical, ask more questions.
Okay. And we need to hold our leaders accountable, right? We need to demand clear rules and oversight to make sure these technologies are being used in the right way.
Absolutely. There are groups out there fighting for digital rights and privacy. Support them, get involved, make your voice heard.
That's good advice. And you know what? I think it's also important to remember that we're not helpless in the face of all this tech. We still have choices.
Right.
We can decide to limit our online activity. Be careful about what we share.
Absolutely.
We can demand transparency. We can vote for leaders who care about privacy.
Exactly. We can support organizations that are fighting for a better digital future.
Well said, Dr. Anderson. This has been a really informative conversation. Thanks for joining us.
It's been my pleasure.
So what have we learned today? We've uncovered the story of Operation Mindfold and talked about the potential downsides of predictive AI. But we've also talked about how important it is to be aware, to think critically, and to take action. The future isn't set in stone. We have a say in how these technologies are made and used. We all have a responsibility to make sure AI is a force for good in the world. This has been The Deep Dive, exploring the world of AI surveillance and the search for truth. Thanks for listening, and until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and keep asking questions.